What's cracking, people? It's your man, Cousin T, aka the Alpha Wingman, representing high-level technicians operating globally and beyond. So listen, today I just wanted to offer a response to the video that the master teacher BGS put up yesterday regarding the life force conversation. And when he alluded to the phrase life force in a previous video, that really spoke to what the essence of a would-be sphere of masculine consciousness should be about, or what the goal, the ultimate goal of a sphere of masculine consciousness should aspire to. And I think that in the other videos that BGS and other contributors to the manosphere at large, and the black manosphere in particular, aspire to and wanted to get around to, but there often is a need for clarifications of philosophies and terminologies, and it would often get lost in necessary. Well, I'd say the majority of the conversations that didn't discuss life force topics were necessary because the overall conversation that was had amongst the roasting sessions, the debates, the egotistical routing out of, I guess would be traitors or infighting or whatever. The overarching conversation was that of the need for mental health and clarity. And I think that a lot of the times when you open up a space for just anyone who hasn't been vetted and or qualified to lead a discussion or to just teach on a subject with clarity and without the input of someone who has not gone through sort of what I refer to as Masculine Mastery University, and I'll describe the 5 steps in just a moment. But a person who has not sat at the feet of a master or been with a mentor or even sought the tutelage of a coach in a certain subject or a sphere or a vocation, then that person lacks the discipline, lacks the knowledge, lacks the patience to qualify what it is that they have to contribute to a conversation, and that ultimately ends up in chaos. Now, the chaos in and of itself can be entertaining, and there are a lot of entertaining, roasting sessions that take place. However, when we talk about the subject of life force, that speaks to the essential focus of clarity when we talk about what's the most valuable resource that we as sentient beings having this human experience have. Our life force is our most precious and valuable resource, and the majority of humanity is at a loss of knowledge of that. And the ruling class have a very distinct knowledge and understanding of that fact that your life force is the most precious commodity, and that actually is what is bought and sold in every market on the planet. And just to give a little sneak peek in terms of what is going on over in the Hot House, which is my Patreon side, in the higher levels, we're about to enter into a new section of information. We've gone through the basics of the rites of passage, but now we're getting into the why of existence. And when we talk about labor and units of output as opposed to value of those units, that speaks to the essence of life force. But for more clarity, when we look at how the units of output or the units of labor are expressed, that's where we have the class distinction. You see a very brief explanation of the distribution of labor has it like this. If you look at a construction site, at the base of the economic pyramid, you have the day laborer. Above the laborer, you have the labor supervision. Above that, you've got the divisional labor management. Above that, you have the project management. Above that, you have the project funding, which is governed by state and local politicians who are swayed by lobbyists. And above that, you've got the industrial captains of industry, aka the masters of the universe, or MTUs. All of those segments come together to build buildings, to craft cities, to service economies, and ultimately express a country's culture to the world and express that influence or that cultural influence globally. Ideally, that's the ideal version of that scenario. Obviously, we've got variations of that, and we've got people who feel one way or the other on either side. But I just use that example to express the value of labor. And labor comes from life force. And that, in this human form, has been commodified and used to exchange for units of exchange that we call money. And that is the basis for a real conversation about culture and why we do the things that we do. Also, that I think succinctly explains why the octane scale it fits so perfectly in line with that, because the laborers have their way of expressing themselves. The labor managers have their way of expressing themselves, all the way up to the project managers, to the politicians, to the lobbyists, and ultimately the masters of the universe. Every level of a social scale has its way of expressing itself. Music, clothes, vehicles, housing. It has its own unique signature and way of expressing itself. That's why I fully support social classes in an ideal circumstance, because your laborers are pleased with being craftsmen. Your labor supervisors are pleased at being multitaskers. All the way up to your politicians and the lobbyists, they're pleased at being a part of the management of people, of large groups of people. And the masters of the universe are pleased with being the visionaries and the harbingers of the power that it takes to put resources together, including human resources, in order to get a major project done, in order to move currency globally. Again, I'm being very basic and very idealistic in this example, but that is the beginning of a true conversation about human nature, about the human condition, about what things look like for a particular culture, how it's expressed, and how to live, to learn, and to leave the world better than you found it, which is essentially the purpose of life. And it all goes back to how a person uses their life force and how their life force is expressed through their human vehicle. The human body is simply a biomechanical vehicle that allows your life force to move through this third dimensional reality. I won't get too far into the metaphysics of things. I'll probably start a channel just based on metaphysics. But people who know, they know. But in any case, to bring it back to the life force response, what I've observed to be one of the biggest hindrance to the traditional manosphere's progress and evolution into the conversations about life force, conversations about the why of things, is because a lot of the conversations end up circulating within the lower levels of the Maslowian hierarchy of need. And this is primarily why I myself and a lot of men in this space choose not to participate in the majority of those conversations is because we choose to listen before we speak. And when you listen to a person who, if they're 2 or 3 sentences into a conversation about relations, and they're espousing that a man needs money, he needs resources, he needs a car, a nice home, all these fancy clothes and all these things in order to get a desirable or a high value woman, then that tells a select man all he needs to know about this person's mentality. They are stuck in the lower levels of the hierarchy of needs. If the acquisition of resources is primary for that person's thought process as far as establishing and maintaining relationships, with desirable and high value, quote unquote, women. This is because that is the definition of a scarcity mentality. In the select manosphere, we discuss things that are beyond resources. We understand that acquiring resources are necessary. We live in a third dimensional reality. We have to provide food, shelter, clothing, and basic necessities in order to even exist sustainably in this space. That should be a given. However, when we talk about relations and how to relate, and how men who are select and pre-select can relate, it's not a question of how to. It's a discussion about how many and or how often and or how to navigate the relations that you do have. Because when you deal out of an abundance mentality, just like the wealthy have time to go to university and to go horseback riding and to learn a musical instrument and to expand their horizons and their mental capacity. This is because they have the resources part down. And when the majority of your focus is not based on acquiring resources, then you get to enjoy the most valuable resources of the human experience. That's time and life force. And that's why in the select manosphere we preach masculine mastery, because it's the masculine master that realizes that you don't need to be a billionaire or even a millionaire to appreciate these 2 most valuable resources, your time and your life force. And so the majority of men can't get past the first few steps, of saying that I need to get this money, I need to get this car, I need to get this house or whatever so that I can get the women. When you're past the necessity to stack up women because it comes more easily to you because you've developed those components that allow women to come to you, and it gives you the advantage of someone who's in a position of wealth. So you see, just like a man who has a lot of resources, a select man who has his resource of his physical presence, his charisma, and his masculinity, he has the ability to pick and choose what type of woman he wants in his life, a woman that's compatible to his mission trajectory, just like a rich man. The only difference is the select man does not have to wear the mask of wealth. He does not need to wear the mask of the power structure or the ruling class. The select man can be himself and own who it is that he has grown to become. He presents that to the world, and the women are aroused and attracted to that accordingly. Not only to the point where they're not scheming or plotting to, remove him of his excess resources, but they want to see how they can add to the select man's lifestyle, how they can add to his mission trajectory or his guiding light or his life force or that life source that's allowed to shine in a select man's life, because he doesn't have to put on pretentiousness. He doesn't have to wear a mask that covers up his true life. And that's why a lot of our conversations center around developing your physical presence, which leads to masculine pursuits, developing your charisma, which comes from your wealth of knowledge and experiences, going out, seeking things, reading books, and things like that. But also honing in on your masculinity. And just to preview things that are coming up in 2020 in terms of the manosphere, we will always have discussions about male and female interactions and relationships, and also spend a little time for the ratchet shit. However, when we talk about the definition and the understanding of the road to masculine mastery, which is a term or phrase that we use a lot in the select manosphere, the path to masculine mastery includes the following. First, a rites of passage, which is boyhood into young manship. Second, logic, how to think. Third, intuition, which I want to clarify that there are two different types of intuition. There's masculine intuition and there's feminine intuition. With feminine intuition, it's all about feeling. Well, I feel this way. I feel as though that person was trying to say this, or this feels like something or the other. With masculine intuition, it's all about sensing. This is how I sense this scenario is going to play out, or that makes sense, or that doesn't make sense. Or just to quote Yoda, I sense that the force is strong with this one. Right? So just so we understand the distinction between feminine intuition and masculine intuition. Fourth, we have sovereignty, which is supreme power or authority over oneself, an environment, or a state. Last is the mission, which is the Shangri-La of the human experience in terms of masculine mastery, or this journey of your life force. It is your mission, the ultimate why in which you have incarnated in this space in the first place. So just to preview what things are to come in the year 2020, and to offer a response to the Master Teacher BGS's Life Force video. So what do you think? Let me know your observations and what you've learned throughout this past year, and what you look forward to appreciating in the year 2020. As always, this is your man, Cousin T, aka the Alpha Wingman, saying, stay sharp and mission focused. Later.